Questions to the Prime Minister. Question number 1, Mr. Andrew Hunter.
The Intergovernmental Conference on Economic and Monetary Union opened in Rome on the 15th of December 1990. My right honourable friend, the Chancellor, represented the United Kingdom. The next ministerial meeting will take place on the 28th of January, and my right honourable friend will continue to argue for the United Kingdom's proposals for the introduction of a common European currency, the hard AQ.
Mr. Hunter.
Despite the failure of a common agricultural policy and of attempts to form a common defence and foreign policy, does my right honourable friend nevertheless accept that the common currency has the supreme merit of being market-led, that its use will be determined by demand and not imposed by centralised bureaucracy?
I certainly agree with my honourable friend, and that, of course, is the essence of our proposal on a common currency. No one would have the hard AQ forced upon them. It would be for firms, for individuals, and for governments to use as and when they wished. And I'm glad to say to my honourable friend that our proposals seem now to be attracting more support.
Stuart Bell.
While sharing with the House his views on a common European currency, can he tell us how useful a common foreign policy would have been leading up to the events of 15th of January?
That's a good one.
I think the question of a common foreign policy is one of those matters that will be discussed in the political IGC, and the honourable gentleman will have heard what I had to say about that on Tuesday.
William Clark.
I'm afraid not agree that in view of the fact that bonds are being issued in greater numbers in AQ, and in March of this year, futures will be able to be dealt with in AQ, doesn't this add weight to the argument that the hard AQ as an alternative currency could come about without having anything foisted on us as far as sterling is concerned?
I entirely agree with my right honourable friend. That certainly is the case. That the real virtue of the hard AQ is that it would be determined by the market, driven by the market, and not imposed upon anyone.
This is Ray Mickey, number 2.
This morning I presided at a meeting of the Cabinet and had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I will be having further meetings later today.
This is Mickey.
In view of the Foreign Secretary's discussions in Paris today, does the Prime Minister agree with me that the long-term peace in the Middle East should be based on nations enjoying security within existing, recognised national boundaries?
That is one of the matters that has been under discussion for some time, and that my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, is continuing to discuss with his colleagues. Insofar as the particular problems of the Middle East are concerned, as the honourable lady knows, we strongly support the idea of a peace conference once the present conflict in the Gulf has been resolved.
To Keith Manns.
I refer my honourable friend to the answer I gave some moments ago.
Manns.
Right honourable friend agree with me that once Saddam Hussein has been expelled from Kuwait and reinvestment and reconstruction can commence, that those countries that have contributed most to the Allied effort in terms of money, material and men should be at the front of the queue for both jobs, work and contracts. And those amongst our near neighbours that have contributed least should be firmly at the rear of the queue.
So I certainly do agree with my honourable friend about that matter, and I had the opportunity of raising that with the Emir of Kuwait during my recent visit to the Gulf.
Mr. Neil Kinnock.
Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister not agree with me that it's good for the morale of our forces and for the peace of mind of their families if there is easy, low-cost communication to home? Could he tell us what progress is being made with improving the current inadequate arrangements? And does he not take my view that in the same way as our forces have long had access to free post, that it's now appropriate in 1991 for them to have at least one free phone call home from the Gulf?
I do agree with the general proposition the right honourable gentleman put forward. And my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Defence, is working to improve the communications home. We have not, however, yet produced a free telephone system.
Mr. Michael Grills.
Could I ask my right honourable friend whether he's had any further news from the Red Cross about the future treatment of British prisoners of war?
Trying hard at the moment to get access, and the International Red Cross are trying as well. They have had, I believe, a preliminary meeting with the Iraqi authorities, but we have not yet heard what the detailed outcome of that may be.
Mr. Harry Barnes.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for giving me advance notice of the question he was about to ask. May I say to the honourable gentleman that no one wants a ground war in the Gulf. No one at all. It can be avoided. I'm sorry, I will let the honourable gentleman ask his question.
You're sounding like her now. Order. Order. Let's have the question from the honourable gentleman.
In the spirit of the Prime Minister's answer to the question I gave on Tuesday, where he said that civilian casualties were to be avoided as far as possible, the instructions to the Air Force were to seek to avoid civilian casualties in Iraq. Will he contact President Bush to tell him to desist from B-52 carpet bombing, which is destroying vast areas around Basra at the moment, where I loyally served my national service, to desist from napalm bombing in future, and to desist from a ground battle which will lead to massive destruction and perhaps mutual destruction of both sets of troops.
I apologise to the honourable gentleman for beginning to answer his question before he'd asked it. As he knows, this was entirely brought about by his courtesy in giving me advance notice of his question, for which I'm most grateful. It is indeed a conspiracy that may not last forever, but enjoyable while it does. May I say to the honourable gentleman that no one at all wants a ground war, and it can of course be avoided if Saddam Hussein does withdraw from Kuwait, as we have asked him to do for some time. We have made perfectly clear before, and I reiterate again, that we will not use certain weapons. But I would not think it right to spare the Iraqi military at the possible risk to British soldiers at some future stage in this conflict. I must say to the honourable gentleman, my prime and overriding concern must and will continue to be for the safety of British soldiers and for the avoidance of unnecessary risk.
Terms.
Would my right honourable friend agree that the continuing presence at London of the Iraqi ambassador is not only offensive but also unnecessary? And after a suitable period for him to settle his personal affairs, will he arrange for him to be removed forthwith?
This afternoon.
Say to my honourable friend, we have already reduced the Iraqi embassy to a minimum number of members of 4. The Iraqi ambassador will be leaving the United Kingdom very shortly, and we are considering further reductions below the tiny number already there. Final decisions upon this last point have not yet been made.
Trimble.
I refer the honourable gentleman to the answer I gave some moments ago.
I wish, Mr. Speaker, to express our concern about recent developments in the Baltic states, where Mr. Gorbachev appears to be reverting to type, for if he did not authorise the recent outrages, he is clearly compromising himself with the elements behind them. I wonder if the government would now commit itself unequivocally to give every support to democracy in the Baltic states, and would the Prime Minister agree with me that it would be quite wrong for Moscow to impose direct rule?
Agree with the honourable gentleman upon the last point, wholly wrong, and I was able to say that to Mr. Yerkins, the Latvian Foreign Minister, when I had the opportunity of meeting him yesterday. I deeply deplore the actions we've seen, both in Vilnius and in Riga, and their tragic consequences of people who have been killed. This is not what we have come to expect from the Soviet Union in recent years, and we hope it will stop without delay.
Michael Clark.
I refer my honourable friend to the answer I gave some moments ago.
Clark.
When I know my right honourable friend has many things on his mind, including the plight of our prisoners of war in Iraqi hands, would he spare a thought for ex-prisoners of war from another campaign. Is he aware that ex-Japanese prisoners of war received compensation from Japan in 1951 of only £76 10 shillings, equivalent perhaps to about £1,000 in the money of today? Would he therefore support their campaign to try and get a more appropriate level of settlement from their now wealthy ex-captors?
I understand the point my honourable friend raises, and I do sympathise with it. The problem that there must be, however, is that the question of compensation was settled under the peace treaty with Japan signed in 1951. Under that treaty, Japan subsequently met her obligations, so I fear I must say to my honourable friend, much to my regret, there is no further action the government are able to take.
List.
I refer the honourable gentleman to the answer I gave some moments ago.
List.
Is the Prime Minister aware of reports today that Secretary of State Baker has a list of 500 firms from 50 countries who have apparently broken the embargo on Iraq, and that includes a large number of German firms who are still apparently supplying biological and chemical materials for Iraq to use? Could he reassure the House that no British firm is on that American list? Because would he agree with me that the families of those young men and women who have been sent to the Gulf, a policy with which I still disagree, would be horrified to think that the sacrifice they may be called to make in the days or weeks ahead would be so that mere shareholders could go richer out of profiteering?
I think I can give the honourable gentleman the assurance he seeks. I'm not aware of any involvement by British firms in the Iraqi chemical weapon programme, but we stand ready to follow energetically any advice to the contrary that may be given to us. But thus far, I have no evidence whatsoever from any source of any kind of any British involvement.
Very successful meeting that I understand my right honourable friend has had with the visiting foreign minister from Latvia this week. May I ask him if he will use the occasion before this House to condemn the Stalinist repression which has come back into Gorbachev's inventory of its government, of his government of the Soviet Union, and get the whole of the West to condemn the abuse of human rights to which the people of the Baltic states are being subjected.
I am certainly content to do that, and clearly in the Baltics the situation at the moment is precarious. The responsibility for latest actions there, I must say, is not entirely clear. It is not absolutely clear who has given the directions that led to the difficulties in Vilnius and Riga. In any event, we will need to judge the Soviet Union by deeds and not words, and that is what we shall do.
Mr. Minnis Campbell.
I refer the honourable gentleman to the answer I gave some moments ago.
Minnis Campbell.
Nothing is ruled in and nothing is ruled out in the fundamental review of the poll tax. May we take it that there will be statutory provision rather than merely guidance to local authorities, which is not always observed, to exempt from payment of the poll tax servicemen and servicewomen while serving abroad, such as the 270 of my constituents from RAF Lucas now serving in the Gulf.
The power the honourable gentleman seeks is already available to local authorities and has been for some time.
Mr. Colonel Gregory.
I refer my honourable friend to the answer I gave some moments ago.
Mr. Speaker, in the hope that my right honourable friend will shortly be...
It's actually, I think it's a visit to York, may I say, to the Prime Minister? But now ask your question, that's good enough.
Mr. Speaker, in the hope that my right honourable friend will very shortly be able to make a visit to the City of York, would he use this opportunity to praise employee share schemes, and particularly those who have participated in denationalised companies, British Telecom and British Rail Engineering? And would he give a warning to the people of York that in the unlikely event we were ever to have a Labour government, it's the proposal that they would take away those shares from those companies?
Well, I will certainly be happy to carry a suitable message either to York or elsewhere on the value and importance of employee share ownerships. I think it is widely recognised. One, I think, of the most clear indications of the success of the privatisation programme and employee share ownership is the disinclination amongst those once in favour of nationalisation to renationalise that which has been privatised.
Mr. Tony Banks.
Will the Prime Minister tell the House what prospects he sees for an early reduction in interest rates?
In York, of course.
In interest rates which will of course affect enterprise in York. Will he also tell the House whether it's true that he said that interest rates in York and elsewhere would come down when Chelsea win the league championship? Notwithstanding an excellent result at Tottenham Hotspur last night, is he aware that large numbers of points would have to be taken away from Liverpool and from Arsenal if Chelsea were to succeed? And that he would have to make it illegal for any team to beat Chelsea during the remainder of this season? May I say to him that if he takes his very original approach towards the reduction of interest rates in this country and in York, he will have my wholehearted support.
I look forward to the honourable gentleman being appointed a spokesman for sport in the not too distant future. I could only say to the honourable gentleman that much though I look forward to Chelsea winning the championship at some stage, I hope I don't have to wait quite that long for a reduction in interest rates.